He's a master duck caller. He's a master author and speaker now. He's a master chef as well. There's so many things that we could gain wisdom from him about today, and we're going to try to tackle it all. His name is Willie Robertson, and I am so fired up to have you on the Matthew West podcast today. Willie, it's an honor and a privilege, and I love the t-shirt you're wearing today.
You like that? I'm a master at many things, but I've mastered none.
A jack of all trades, then? Is that what you are?
I'm also a skit performer. Last time I was with, what was that, last week we were together and we were doing a skit.
K-Love Fan Awards.
So funny. That was so funny, dude. It reminded me of Duck Dynasty because I was playing the straight guy and you were being the goofball.
Well, what was funny was you guys had a joke. For those who didn't see the K-Love Fan Awards, there was a bit earlier where where Sadie Robertson, so this was a family affair. The Robertson family was well represented at the K-Love Fan Awards. Sadie was one of the hosts, and there was a whole video bit where you guys were talking about how, Sadie was trying to figure out what's her thing as a host, what was going to set her apart and make her unique, right? And you filmed a video where you were kind of coaching her, and she was like, I don't know, Dad, like Matthew West has a thing, and then you're like, man, Matthew West doesn't have a thing. And you started like trashing me in front of everybody. Oh, it was amazing. And so then you and I were presenting an award together, and I decided to steal your thing and say that it was my thing. And I went full Duck Dynasty gear.
You did.
Did you know that I owned that much camo?
You went all out. I was so impressed because I didn't know you were going to go the full. And you were trying to hide it, which would have been awesome if I would have just seen it. But I caught you right before, so I knew what I was up against.
I know. I was trying for you not to see me until we hit the stage, but I stayed in my dressing room with. And by the way, all that camo I was wearing, I had to go buy it. I have to confess, that was not even like in my closet.
Well, that was obvious by the creases from where you just took it out of the bag. Like, I've seen hunters like you before. They show up to hunting camp, and you can tell they just took their stuff out of the plastic bag. Very authentic. Very authentic, man.
Oh, man, I had the tags were still on and everything. I'm from Chicago, Willie, so I need you to take me hunting and teach me your ways. I do have – you sent me a gift with your new book, which I'm so excited to talk about, Gospeller, your brand new book. And you sent me a duck call, and I've been blowing into this thing in preparation for our interview, and I can't get anything out of it. So I'm going to need you to teach me. Is there any tool you can give me, even though this is a virtual video or virtual interview, is there a tip you can give me even now to help my process here?
Well, try it just a second. Let me see what we're working with here.
I'm just blowing through it. What am I supposed to do?
Right. Well, if you're going to do that method, you're going to have to suck because you're blowing on the wrong end.
Oh, wait.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, that's.
Oh, that's it? I did it. There are ducks lining up outside my studio right now.
You're blowing through the wrong end of it. That's unbelievable.
I told you I'm from Chicago. I need your help, Willie. Show me your ways.
And I always say it's like a musical instrument, which is interesting that you couldn't figure out. It's like a musical. If you were to pick a saxophone up, would you stick your face in the big part and try to blunt? I'm wondering.
That's the equivalent. Oh, man. I'm embarrassed on my own show. I'm sorry. I need you. You got to teach me your ways. You got to teach this city boy.
That was fun. Hey, and I've got this shirt because, this is one of your older models. It's got a little bleach stain on it.
It's well
because
worn.
We toured together. What year was that?
I say pre-pandemic. What was it, maybe 2019?
Yeah, for sure. So we did a little mini tour there in the tour bus, and we had fun. And
I had a blast with you. I'll tell you what. One of my biggest moments where I was. I've hung out with some pretty cool people, but feeling like I was in the presence of an absolute icon there's only been a few moments like that, and one of those moments was 1 a.m. at a Waffle House with Willie Robertson.
Oh, for sure.
Dude,
Yeah.
dude, I mean, people couldn't care less that some singer was there. They were stepping over each other to try to buy your meal. I mean, everybody wanted pictures with you, dude. I had so much fun traveling around the country with you, but I got to tell you, that tour that we did together, it was focused towards couples, and we were talking about marriage. We both had our wives out there. It was really special, and I knew of you, and we had met a couple times. Of course, I had watched your show like the rest of America, but spending time with you and then listening to you speak and share the gospel from the stage, which now I've had the chance to hear many times, I was so blown away and impressed by your knowledge of the gospel, but also your desire to like just get after it and tell people about Jesus. So when I received your new book in the mail, I was not for a second surprised by what the heartbeat of this book, Gospeller, is about. And so even more than you teaching me how to do a duck call, I was excited about having you on the show to talk about the heart behind this brand new book that just came out, by the way. Congratulations. How does it feel to release a brand new book that you worked for so long on?
Oh man, it's you know, it feels, it's just like you work so hard, and then you're talking about the book so much and what it's going to be, and then when it actually comes out is amazing, and it's like a relief, and then you're excited, and then now hearing the feedback from people is really cool. I've gotten some great feedback from people all over, and yeah, man, it was. I feel I'm really proud of this book. I really am. It's the most proud I've been of probably most any project I've ever done, because this was, you know, I've done this more than business, more than obviously TV, anything. Even before I was married, I was preaching the gospel to people, and so I've just had such a love for it, and it's kind of like an art form, and so being able to put all these stories down, even if no one bought it, it just to have for my kids and people that I know. I wanted to capture these stories. I just didn't want them to be forgotten. All the stories that I tell, which is not all of them, it's just a sampling, and then just really key in on the you know, the kind of how I see it in the New Testament. And I felt like God had a message for me to say, and I don't use that lightly, and I don't even use that language often, but I really did feel like God had a specific message He wanted me to put out at this time. The timing seemed right, even though it was like, oh, this is a bad year because it's a political year and everybody's. But I was like, I think this is the time. You know, this is the time that we need to have some answers for people and some hope.
Yeah, 1 Peter 3 talks about, you know, giving a reason for the hope that you have, and like this is really a discipleship book. I've been listening to the audiobook on my nightly walks with the dogs, and I was pleasantly surprised to hear your actual voice. You recorded the audiobook. I've done that, and I know how painstaking that is, but I love hearing your story in your own words, and the book really kicks off with you talking about your family tree, like the history of faith, or on some parts of your family, the lack of a Christian foundation, and then what God did in your dad's life. Talk a little bit about kind of that origin story of your faith in Christ and how it was handed down to you from your family.
Yeah, well, first on the audio book, I hate reading. This is not my first book. I've written several, and I hate it so much that I would pay my brother to read them, and because I was like, I'm never doing that again, and so I would just pay him. He was always up for some cash, and so I'd pay him to read it. And then with this one, I was like, I have to read this book. And so I had it all planned out in my mind. I thought, okay, I can do this. Because most people are not going to understand. They're like, what's so hard about reading a book? You wrote it. But I'm telling you, it's crazy trying to read. And I'm not a good reader anyway. So I told him, I said, I'll do it like 1 hour a day over like a month. And I thought I can do that. And they were like, no, you can't do it that way. You have to
all in
you
one.
have to go in. I kind of played chicken. I said, fine, I'm not reading it. And they're like, well, fine, we'll get somebody else to read it. And I was like, dang it, I'm going to have to read this thing. So, yeah, so you're sitting in there like 6 or 7 hours a day. But this one I went all out. And so I was not even reading it. When I did the audio version, I wanted it to feel like I was speaking or talking to someone. And so it's not me reading. It's like when I was like in the studio, I mean, I was so animated. My hands were up and I was like,
you can feel that.
And I would mess up a lot because I wasn't like exactly reading the words. And so I was proud of the way it came out, especially the audio version, because it came out. I've had people tell me it just felt like you were talking,
That's how it felt. It felt like I was listening to an extended podcast, but it was like, and I was just drawn in right away by the story of your dad, and just like, I mean, the way you were talking about just how he was converted sitting in a bar. You talk about that?
That's what impacted me, Matthew, when I started thinking about it. So we did the movie last year, The Blind, and we told mom and dad's story, and it was a real hard story to tell. And I thought, what if my dad had not been converted? Because he had kicked us out of the house. You have to say the movie, but he had kicked us out of the house. He was like a terrible person, and it was pretty much hopeless. I mean, it was over. The marriage was over, and the only thing left to save the day was actually the gospel and him literally changing his life and being converted. And so my Aunt Jan, my dad's sister, came in, and she still cared about Phil, and this was a time when mom couldn't really minister to him because their marriage was over. And so she was just trying to survive, and figure out what was next. And she had moved on. We actually moved to the city we're in now. And I think she probably thought she'd never see him again. But my aunt she just had a passion for sharing her faith. And he wouldn't listen to her, of course, but she went to this preacher and begged him, will you go talk to my brother, and share the gospel with him? And she said, if you convert him, he'll convert 1,000 people. And how she saw that was incredible, because this Phil is not a good guy at all. And that preacher, it wasn't even in the same city, it wasn't even in the same state, and he got in his car and drove up to this bar to share the gospel with Phil. And Phil was a scary guy. And the preacher told me later, Phil has like a pistol in his belt and he's cursing, and it was adversarial. He didn't even want to hear it, but he planted the seed. And then it wasn't until later when Dad finally was like down and out and living in the woods and running from the police that he remembered that story and said, man, that guy told me something about hope and living again and changing. And so he gets converted at 28. And what impressed me was like, what if he wouldn't have come to the Lord? I would have grown up, with a single mom. Like, I don't know, like, who knows, like, I don't even know if I'd be a Christian. I wouldn't have been to church. I wouldn't have gone to youth camp, which is where I met Corey. I met her in 5th grade.
Wow.
It just changed everything in life. And then if you go that forward, like, 50 years later, like, think about Duck Dynasty, the impact it had, the prayer at the end of the show. Think about the podcasts that have come out, all the work Sadie's done, the movies, the books. Hundreds of millions of people all over the world have been exposed to the gospel in some way. And I can trace that back to that couple in South Arkansas with no money. Nobody knew who they were. Their marriage was over, and the gospel came in. And if it would have just affected our lives, it would have been fine. Like, we would have been happy as we could have been. But God had so much more planned out for us. So as I look back, Matthew, I think about how appreciative I am. But looking forward, I think, who is it that I could tell the gospel to that could literally change their marriage, their life, their kids, their grandkids, like generational change? And so I called it the name of the chapter, Swamp Dweller, because all my titles rhyme with Gospeller, so that's Swamp Dweller. Phil was the Swamp Dweller. But it was more about gospel genealogy. And so I was just kind of fascinated with like tracing your roots back and how do you trace them back spiritually. And for my family, that's where it started.
That's powerful.
With that generation.
Yeah.
And then came us, and now we've got Sadie and my other kids in that generation. And you've seen the gospel, the fruit of it just play itself all the way out and expand. And it was all about sharing your faith. So that's where I wanted to start with that, going, you never know whose life, if that preacher would have said, hey, man, look, tell him to come to church, and I'll try to it wouldn't have happened. It wouldn't have happened. He had to go, like Matthew 28, he had to go after him and share with him.
Did that preacher, ever get to see, did anybody stay in touch with him, or did he get to watch from a distance, or did he pass away? I'm just curious if he has any idea of, I always think about the preacher who preached that where Billy Graham got saved. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To me, it reminds me of that kind of story. That preacher going into that bar and planting that seed with Phil, and like you said, the fruit. It's such a powerful story. Did that preacher ever get to see some of that come to fruition?
He saw it up close. So he's from the town that I'm from. So when Dad got converted, he moved to West Monroe. He and Mom got back together. They put us up. That church had put Mom up in an apartment.
Oh, wow.
So we lived in an apartment complex, but we saw the preacher every Sunday. In fact, he taught me. There was they had a seminary here, and he actually taught me in seminary when I went. So no, he and I were. He's the one that told me the story. So he was a teacher of mine, and he and Phil. Well, in fact, when Phil became an elder at the church, he was in there. So they were elders together at the church. So some 30 years later.
So he got to witness it. Wow. Talk about seminary. Oh, go ahead.
We didn't even have time to put it at the end of the movie, but so Bill passed away. It was after Duck Dynasty, so he was able to see even the kind of the fame of Phil. And so we had this awesome videos of him talking, and my aunt's passed away as well. But we had both of them. We were going to put on the end of the movie. We had both of them talking about Phil, what he was like, and then so we shared together and all that. So it was a cool story. And actually, when I was a youth minister, I had both of his grandsons in my youth group.
So just
and we're all so close today. I know the whole family.
I love that term, gospel genealogy, and I love how looking behind you and saying, "Man, I may never even gone to church. Look what the Lord did," and how that gives you a fresh and a broader perspective, looking ahead of how that one. You never know how that one interaction with that one person might impact more than just that one person's life. That is a powerful thing. What made you go back to seminary?
Well, I didn't. So my two older brothers were in seminary. We all thought we were going to be preachers. And part of that was because of how Phil was. Phil, once he got converted, man, he just went full bore, night to day, kind of similar to, Saul and Paul. And so Phil but he's preaching the gospel to everybody. I mean, it was almost every night of the week at our house, someone was down there and Phil was studying with him. Then he kind of got known for that. He would what would have been termed a known gospeler. And so people would bring people down there, and they were all kind of cats, man. They were people. I remember, murderers and every type of sinful behavior you can imagine. And Phil was so kind of rough anyway, so they'd come in there and he'd sit him down, be like, "All right, what's your story?" And then he would just go into preaching. And he still lives on the same river, the Washita River, and so he'd end up taking them down there and baptize them in a river and send them on down the road. So thousands of people. So we had seen that. We were all kind of we were fired up on preaching the gospel. Even as a teenager, we shared with a lot of people. And so I kind of thought we were all we're going to all be preachers. So they were in seminary. They were upperclassmen. Then I came in. And then, so I did half the program, but I was dating this girl, Corey, and she was going to go to college, and I had no plans of going to college. But I kind of figured if she goes off to college, I may miss out on this one. So I decided to go to college, Miss South. And so I called her. I said, I think I'm going to drop out of seminary and go to college. So, and then we got married and went to college together. And So I know I've got half a 2-year degree, so I know just enough
to be dangerous.
Get me in trouble.
But I think you made the right call because you and Corey make quite a team, man. That's pretty awesome.
Yes.
And I've gotten to see that up close and watch the impact that the story of your family has had on countless individuals. The word gospeller, where and how did you come across that word? And you, in reading this book, just by somebody picking up this book, most likely they're going to learn the definition of a new word, gospeller, a person who zealously teaches or professes faith in the gospel. Where did that word hit your radar, and what made you go, that's the title of the book, that's what I want to talk about with my latest book?
It's a real word. I had never heard of it. So I was writing this book, and Corey, I think originally I was going to call it something evangelist, and Corey came in and said, hey, she was like doing a word search around evangelist, and she said, I found this really cool word. It's called gospeller. And she goes, it was an old word that used to be really common. Like it was in our language, our vocabulary, even in America. And it just kind of faded away. And now it's like a dinosaur word, which I thought was a little ironic because in some ways, even people who are known for sharing the gospel, maybe kind of have gone away. So I loved it. And I said, that's it. That's what we're going to do. And so in my mind, it was like something that was in culture that was positive that's now gone. Maybe we can try to reemerge that and bring that back into the culture where people, and it's not necessarily pastoral. So it's not like we think of a pastor, who gets paid to do this. It's more like common people, working people,
Yeah, nowhere in the definition does it say somebody who has the right degree and zealously teaches, or somebody who is deemed qualified or has the proper credentials. It's literally a person, which makes me think, like, one of the reasons I'm excited for this book is sometimes it's like you can stop short at going, you know what, Jesus has changed my life. Now I'm just going to go on and live it. And sometimes you can get so intimidated. One of the things you talk about in the book that I remember hearing in the audio book, you talk about how sometimes when we think about evangelism or gospeling, like it's like we talk or think more about people in faraway countries and missions work, and fail to notice the needs right around us or the opportunities that maybe even are scarier. The thought of witnessing to a coworker or a friend. How do you what do you say to people who would say, all right, they don't feel gifted enough or qualified enough, or they don't have the platform that a Willie Robertson has? Like, I feel unqualified to be a gospeller. What do you say to that?
Yeah. It's one of the reasons I wrote the book, because I felt like people would just disqualify themselves right out of the gate. Mostly what I hear is, I don't know the Bible well enough, so I can't really talk about it because I don't know that. I often hear people say, I don't know where to start. Like, how do you start that conversation? They don't want to seem weird, and so they don't know how to start. Or they say, this is not my gifting, or I'm shy, or whatever that. Or hey, you don't know my past. Like, I'm the last person to be telling someone else how to live their life.
Right.
Or they just bought into the lie, which I think this is from the evil one, which is we just need to keep that to ourselves. So, that's not something that you even need to be saying at work, or perhaps there's even rules against that. And so knowing all the things that we had kind of disqualified ourselves, I wanted to try to knock those down one by one and say, okay, let's get past this. Let's get past these to where, and I kind of laid the argument out like, okay, Matthew 28, the Great Commission was that just for the disciples, or is that for everyone? And he says, make disciples, baptize people, and teach people. And so if you think that's for all of us, if that's all of us calling, if that is the mission, if that's your mission in life, then I just wanted to live my life where I was at least around those three things. Because I know a lot of people, they're not anywhere near those three things. They're not making disciples, they're not baptizing people, and they're not teaching people. And incidentally, every one of those starts with a conversation. Like, if you don't have conversations with people, you're not doing any of those. And so you have to open your mouth. And then I try to make the case like, it's not weird if I ask, if I say, Matthew, hey, whether we just met or whether we, it's like, hey, are you married or do you have kids? And these are just common questions. And so if you can ask those kind of questions, then we can talk about the most important relationship, which is the relationship with Jesus. And then I go in there on the chapter storyteller, Jesus with the woman at the well, John chapter 4. And he's talking to this woman. He's never met her. It's an awkward situation. They're not from the same area. He's a man. She's a woman. And Jesus starts with like a master class of how to start a conversation. He simply says, "Can I get a drink of water?" Well, if you can ask someone for a drink of water, that's where it can start. That story ends by the entire village coming to know Jesus. But it started with that simple question right there. And so a lot of times, Matthew, I just like when I'm talking to someone, I just start a conversation and I may share the gospel with them. I just like, at first I want to get to know them and like, we can be friendly. And then I always try to listen. I try to listen for something that I'm like, there we go.
Yeah.
And a lot of times that door will open by something I hear, maybe fear, maybe damage, hurt, family member, maybe health, there's just things that can kind of open the door up, and I feel like it's kind of a layup. I mean, sometimes I have a guy come to me and say, "Hey, Willie, I got a DWI on Friday night. My wife kicked me out of the house on Saturday, and can you help me?" I'm like, "Yeah, okay, this will be a layup. Are you ready to change some things about your life?" So we'll talk about repentance, and we'll talk about some of these things, and some are not. Some it takes a while. Some of these conversations take 20 minutes, some 2 hours. Some I've been having a conversation with people for 20 years. 20 years about this. I'm still there. I always try to think like, what's another way? And you just never know. Like I tell a story about Bill in there where I kept trying to talk to him about his faith. He didn't want to hear it. And I just kept thinking like, what is it? And so I was finally able to get through with a whole new question. And Paul was praying. He said he was praying that he said, "Pray for me that the mystery of the gospel can come out of my mouth more clearly." And that always just fascinates me. Like Paul knew the gospel better than anyone. Yeah. Why is he still asking that it can come out of his mouth? Because I know why. Because it wasn't getting through to some people. And so I look at it more as an art form, not as science. So science is if I tell you something, I tell another guy if I tell you this, then you'll do this. And it's just not always like that. Like, like the idea, like if I told you, Matthew, do you want to be part of a community and we call it a church and you can have friends? You'd be like, yeah, that's what I need. And that'd be so awesome. But I could tell another person that and they would immediately throw a wall up and say, no, that's the worst thing. Because I was hurt by a church of people when I was young, and I'm like, oh, and so that doesn't. The thing that works for someone may not work for someone else. The methods may change. The message is the same. Yeah. The gospel is the gospel. Jesus is Jesus. But the methods we can use they're all different, like they're all kind of different ways. What physical death may be a big thing for someone, but if I'm talking to someone that's 17 years old,
yeah,
they may not even ever think about physical death, not even in their purview of what they're even thinking. So,
which that makes me think like the wisdom of Paul that he was continually praying that the message of the gospel would be more clearly delivered, and maybe in that like that he would have the discernment that he'd be staying close enough to God in any and every situation that he knew I'm talking to a different individual, a different group of people, a different belief system. Always having that sensitivity and making sure that it's less about the words that we share, more about us being tuned in to what God wants us to share. Because, like you said, the message is going to stay the same, but the method can be different. And one of the biggest things I hear you saying about the method that everybody can grab onto as they read this book is like being practical, being available, and being authentically who you are, which if there's one thing, like among the many things I've always admired about you, like there's an authenticity about you that I think draws people to you. Talk about, I know a lot of times it's like as a singer for me or, hosting a show or whatever I'm doing, it's like there's a thing about being, where you're like, you're kind of on or you think you're being on. But I think the more I've been in front of a camera or on a stage, I feel like I want to find the most find and be the most authentic version of me on and off the stage. I don't want that to be two different people. And I think for somebody who doesn't have the type of career that you and I have, the equivalent of that would be is I don't want to be one way when I'm in church and another way when I'm out of church. I want to be the authentically flawed version of me that knows he needs God's grace and is thankful that he's been saved by it. Talk about the importance of authenticity when it comes to being a gospeler and reaching somebody around you who's lost and hurting and needs hope, and they need it by seeing an authentic believer.
I think that's the real thing. I think that's why Duck Dynasty was so popular, because I think they saw some authenticity there. It wasn't people who necessarily were striving to be on TV no matter what. That wasn't the case at all. And, they just saw us as real people and a real family, and, and so they could, you don't think you're better than anyone else. And I think that can resonate when we're sharing the gospel with people. I mean, one, hopefully our lives are attractive enough in some way. If the fruits of the Spirit are pouring out of them, then they may ask a question about that, and they may say, why is it that you don't get mad like other, why do you not do this, or why do you not, and so there may be some interest there as to why that is. But I think that does, I think it, and when you can do that, when you can be authentic with people, and when you generally care for people, I think it starts there. I think when you really care for people, they even want to hear their story. When Jesus asked that woman at the well, he cared about her story. He was opening up a can of worms. And I think a lot of us today, Matthew, we're like, I don't know if I want to get into that. I got enough problems of my own. I've got my own family. And so we're just kind of selfish, And so, I mean, even in the cities, where you see people like somebody's dying on a sidewalk and people are just stepping over them and going about their lives. And so I think when we really care about people and we get into their stories and we want to offer them hope. But like the scripture you quoted, always be prepared. So what does that mean to be prepared, And so I kind of wanted to prepare when I talk to people to actually have some answers. And so knowing where I could go in the Bible. And I tried to make that easy for people in the book. I've got about 7 scriptures that I go to, 7 texts. That's it. And usually that's about all I think people can handle anyway, especially at one time. Is like, I don't give them 50 scriptures. But so many people are intimidated by the Bible. They pick it as an old big book. And, if you start from the beginning, I mean, so I can go through. And so I just got a little, I'm trying to give people a way. Yeah. Like, here's a way I start, and I just go right there. And so I try to be prepared in that way. And I always learn something, somebody hits me with something. But at the end of the day, sin is still sin. Lives are lives. The older I get, I'm like, I pretty much have seen, I've heard a lot of the stories of where they're at. And sometimes, Matthew, it's just that one thing that they can't get past. And maybe I can help them to get past that. And so I think we start taking on the nature of Jesus in that way. We're ambassadors for Jesus. And so sometimes I may feel like, a counselor, where Jesus is the great counselor, right? So I feel like I'm trying to walk them through where that is, almost like a counselor would with someone. Jesus is called the great physician. Sometimes it feels like that. At the end of the day, the doctor knows so much knowledge about medicine and the body. But when you come in and you have a diagnosis and he goes, well, Johnny, here's the deal. Here's the problem. Here's the solution. Do you want in or not? And that's pretty much what it boils down to, even though he could give you all the medical stuff, and so sometimes I feel like that's the Bible. There's a problem with sin. Jesus' solution. Do you want in? It's at its simplest form. Yeah. That's pretty much what it is. And so if I can help them now, once they become a believer, then they're gonna. It's kind of like a bad diagnosis. If you get something over the next year, you're gonna learn more about that than you ever thought you would. You're gonna talk to other people who's had this. So that's almost like the church, And so this book is really a frontlines thing. It's like frontline with the world, not necessarily overseas. The world may be in your house. It may be your children. It may be your uncle. It may be somebody that you know. This is not just stranger encounters. give you some answers for that, get the story, and then the church can take, and there's so many other facets of that.
I think this is a great challenge to the Christian, even who's maybe been a Christian for a minute, and you can start to lose sight of the Great Commission and maybe become complacent, or just like you said, focused. Man, I got a lot going on in my life, and you maybe lose sight. I love that when you were talking about the Great Commission and kind of asking yourself, how far removed are you from those three things of going, making disciples, baptizing them, and teaching them to observe all things that Jesus commanded? To take some inventory of your spirit, of the outflow of your faith. Is it flowing out? Are you actively seeking out those opportunities, or are you content just to be like, I'm going to just keep going to church, feed me, feed me, feed me? So I really think there's this is a challenge to the believer to say hey, has the message of the gospel changed your life? Well, if the answer is yes, then you are part of the Great Commission. So it feels like a little bit. I feel like the book is a hug, but it's a little bit of a punch, or a little bit of a charge as well, in a good way, right?
Well, I didn't want to tell him that, but you've already told him.
Sorry.
So yeah, it is. It really is. No, it really is. I told Corey that the other day. I said, this will be hard for people, because then they'll feel guilty going, oh no, I feel like I'm not. And I've heard that from people. It's like, shoot, because then you do feel like, man, I never talk about my faith. I never mention that to other people.
We need those challenges, though. It's like how I felt like reading your book. I think about it when I read Crazy Love by Francis Chan. We need messages from authentic believers who point us and charge us to go deeper and to ask some of those hard questions and to take inventory of how we're living. So I think deep down, as followers of Christ, we want that. We want to be spurred on, and I feel like that's what you're doing to the believer. Hey, the time is now. This world is hurting. This world is lost. This world needs hope, and God's put you here in your sphere and circle of influence for such a time as this. Don't waste the moment that you've been given. So I love the urgency of that. I think you're right. Sometimes we avoid challenges like that, but I think you break it down in such a beautiful and yet challenging way.
Well, and really, there's no trick here. When you read the book, it's pretty much just a bunch of Bible and some stories that I tell. And so there's no new I've never thought about that. It's literally just taking the Great Commission. Jesus didn't say a whole lot of stuff post-resurrection to Acts chapter 1. There wasn't a lot. We don't have much. But that was one of the main things he said to go do were those three things. That was the mission. And so I think if we get off mission, Matthew, and we start thinking the mission is to go to church and to try to be a good person, that's not a good mission. That's not the mission that we need to be on.
And that's not the fulfilling mission. The last thing I'll say is when you talk about this book, Gospeller, I'll go back to the beginning of what you said about when you think about your background and your upbringing and what would have happened if that pastor had never gone to visit and Phil at that bar, and that seed that was planted, and then the thought of how many countless individuals have been impacted, that gospel genealogy that you talk about. When I talk to you and as I read this book, it inspires me to think about the gospel genealogy that God could use me to leave behind. And I think every believer at the end of the day, we want to stand before the Lord and hear him say, well done. And I believe that's what happens when we live a life living out the Great Commission and not being overwhelmed or fearful of what it might require. What are you hoping readers are going to feel or do differently after they read Gospeller? I almost said it wrong.
I hope that they'll go at least take a chance on talking to someone else and trying to share their faith. And they may fall flat on their face. They may feel like, oh, no, that didn't. But, we're just planting seeds. We're not it's not on us. But just having that conversation can be huge. And I think once the sermons start coming from the people sitting in the pews, when that goes out, just think about it. If you've got 1,000 people sitting in a building would you rather have the one guy talking in the community or the 1,000? I'll take the 1,000 every time, you know. And we're all ministers of the gospel, and so once they start going out into their jobs and telling others, and then I think we can really see revival. And so even if your church is like dead, let's say you're in, you know, I mean, you're like me, you go all over the country, you know, all these little small towns, and, you know, they don't have a giant vibrant church, you know, maybe with a great communicator and a super worship band. You can take this and go share the gospel and start converting people in wherever you're at in North Carolina or Iowa or Wisconsin, you know, wherever that's at, and you can create revival that may create even more revival. And so I just think we've looked at it, you know, a lot of us just, we go to church, and it's probably the worst place to have a conversation is there, because most of the time, like, I just go in, I sit there, I listen, and then I leave, you know. And so it may not be the best place. And so this is something that would be great on a Friday night, you know, or a Saturday at deer camp, or, you know, that's where it can all, you know, the other 6 days out of the week is where we can share our faith. And nothing against Sunday morning and what happens there. It's just, I think we may think as Christians, like, I guess that's where it's supposed to happen, right? And I guess the preacher's supposed to do it all. And I'm trying to make the case that no, this is for you. This is for you, your family, the people you know, and
it's
and
that
you can
shift.
start going and getting after it.
It's that shift of, like, every moment is an opportunity. Our daily life, our ministry is like, you know, I've been challenged personally a lot, and I know you and we're on public platforms a lot, but, you know, sometimes I feel like I've had the Lord convict me that it's like, you know, Matthew, you don't punch a clock when you walk off the stage after your show. There's 23 more hours in the day that I want to use you to be, as you would say, a gospeller. And I think a lot of times we can compartmentalize the ministry component of our lives, or the faith component of our lives. And I think what you're challenging with this book is a challenge that is needed for every believer right now, to not compartmentalize their faith, to acknowledge that every single interaction we have with people could be an opportunity for us to leave a gospel genealogy. And wouldn't you say, Willie, I mean, look, it's no secret how insane our times are right now, and how, I mean, and look, it's always been crazy times. I think every generation has said, well, ain't going to get any worse than this. And then it just keeps getting crazier and crazier. But I do feel like a spiritual awakening is needed now more than ever. And that's not going to happen if God's people don't accept that calling to be part of the Great Commission, and take that ministry on a daily, moment by moment approach, just reaching and loving the lost, and not punching a clock or compartmentalizing our faith. So I'm getting fired up as I talk to you. I'm fired up as I read the book. It's a reminder that me, what I call like a professional Christian, because it's kind of my job. Do you know what I'm saying? I don't want that mentality. I want the mentality that's not my job. It's my mission. It's I'm passionate about this. I want to, I want to look at that way. I don't want to put my headphones on at the airport just because I don't want to talk to somebody. I want to be available if that stranger asks me a question, because God might have me in that seat in that moment for a reason. That's a shift in thinking that can be monumental, can it?
I think it can be huge. I think, like a couple of weeks ago, I was in the Atlanta airport at the I was in Nashville. I was actually in that new nice Delta club they got in Nashville, and a guy walks over. When I walked in, he looked at, and I knew. I said he recognized me, and so I go sit. And I was kind of in the corner, and he, about 5 minutes, he comes up and he's looking at me, and he's got a drink in his hand. He goes, "Hey, I know who you are." And I said, "Oh, cool," and he goes, I appreciate what all y'all do. And I said, "Thank you for saying that." And he goes, I'm not really living the kind of life I need to be living.
Whoa.
Well, I heard it. And I looked at him, I said, "Why would you say that to me?" And he kind of looked, and I said, we just met each other. Why would you say that? I said, "Why don't you have a seat? Let's talk about why you would say that." So he gave me the clue by saying that. And then we sat there for probably 45 minutes and just talked about his life. I got his story, just like the one with the well. I got his story. He told me about how he grew up, the church he went to, where it went wrong. He had been kind of damaged by the church. And so just planted that gospel seed on him right there, Because here's the deal, Matthew. There's people being converted in America right now. They're just not being converted by Christianity or the gospel. They're being converted into every kind of lunacy, worldly thing. And we're all just sitting around, and the chapter is called Hope Yeller. Sometimes I feel like we as Christians, we think we're called to yell out how bad the world is. And like, how many times has somebody come up to you, probably this week, and said, "Oh, did you hear what happened in California? Did you hear what happened here? Did you hear what and it's like we're just telling everybody how bad everything is, and we're never saying the gospel or never giving any hope. And so I make in the book, I'm like, we're not called to, God didn't say, hey, go tell everybody how bad it is. Because as bad as it is right now in America, if you think it's bad, most people do, the stories that we're pulling from the New Testament, they were literally getting killed. Like Stephen is stoned right out of the gate for sharing his faith. Yeah. So in some ways, I'm like, don't tell me it's that bad, because these stories, they were preaching the gospel, and every one of them were going to lose their life because of sharing the gospel. And today in America, we're like, well, I don't feel real comfortable with it. I'm like, well, don't worry, because someone else is going to convert your kids. They're going to convert the next generation. Man. They are prepared and able. They're ready. They've been working on it for decades about how to take your mind and take your heart, take your soul, and spin you into this worldly thing that we're living in. And sadly, they're winning. You were talking about, like, after we've been there in Christianity a while, did you realize that most people are converted by people who are converted within the first year of their conversion? So what is it that the longer we're in this thing, the less likely we are to share with anyone else? Isn't that nutty? That's the craziest thing ever.
That's what I was getting at. It's like, and that's where I think the sobering truth in that to take away from is that the enemy never stops working on us. Right. So the longer you're a Christian, it's not the further you removed from Satan's radar. Like if he can get to you through complacency, he'll do it. If he can get to you through laziness, he'll do whatever it is. But you're exactly right. It's like a lot of times those who've had the most recent or most dramatic conversions will be the most passionate about going and telling others. It's like you said, that woman at the well, the whole village got saved as a result of that. Like, you know what I mean? So there's power in that. But I think you're speaking not only to the new believer who maybe feels unqualified because, well, I've made so many mistakes, who am I to be a gospeller? But you're also speaking to the believer who maybe grew up in a Christian home or has been a Christian for a long amount of time and said, hey, maybe I've lost sight of the Great Commission here. I've been, trying to lead my family well, but man, what about the world right outside my door? What about my coworkers? And seeing that through a different lens is a needed message right now. And what you just said kind of shook me about, like, people are converting to something. And I think, man, that is something now more than ever, a call for followers of Jesus. If you know he's changed your life, you have a burning desire to make sure that you're bringing people with you. My kids have that sweatshirt. Their youth group all has this sweatshirt that says "Make Heaven Crowded," and I always think about that. Like, I love that my kids and this youth group's message is like, we want to bring people with us. That's the goal. It's like, come with me. I got to tell you about the hope that I've found, and there's opportunities all around us. So, man, thank you for firing me up and for firing everybody who's listening to this up. The brand new book, Gospeller, is available everywhere. I highly recommend the audiobook because it's like Willie's just telling you a little story right in your ear. It's like he's with you in your car. It's a special thing. And I learned how to use my duck call. I was using it backwards. So I've grown a lot today. I feel like you've helped me in a big way.
Oh, that's awesome, man. It's always so good talking to you and catching up. And just appreciate all the stuff you do. And and thank you for calling on putting a light on this. The subtitle is "Turning Darkness to Light, One Conversation at a Time." Man. I saw it happen with my family, and I'm eternally grateful, which is why I'm still sharing it, because people say, like, man, I'm just so glad y'all kept your faith, even through the fame and all that stuff. And I'm like, we felt like we never would have been anywhere without that. So we owe everything to that message. And so I really think that we can, have some conversations, have some answers for the hope that we have, and get out there and get after it. And let's get revived, because, I don't know where it's going without it, so it just seems like it's getting darker and darker.
Well,
around this place.
I just can't help but think that the gospel genealogy that's going to be created one by one as people read this book and feel that charge and make themselves available, just like you did at the Delta Lounge. And I love that you closed with that. That was just such a practical, perfect example of being available, being out in public, and hearing that. And you could have easily just gone, man, I'm tired. I got a flight. I'm going to go sit in a booth and eat a snack in the lounge. I could have just taken a picture with the guy and moved on. But you saw that opportunity. You were obedient in that moment, and you engaged in the conversation. And only God knows how that Delta Lounge conversation is going to grow a gospel genealogy in that man's life and his family. So thank you for not only telling us and giving us practical steps, but showing us what that looks like in real life.
Well, and stories are contagious, Matthew, because you know what gets me fired up? Reading those stories in the book of Acts. That gets me fired up. And so I'm so thankful that Luke wrote them down, and that, you know, that's what stories can do. You know, me and you both are in the storytelling business. And so I told them on TV, you know, we told a story, you know, and they're contagious. When I hear good stories, I'm like, man, that gets me fired up. And it's the same. That's what the Bible is, you know, that's right. It's the stories that were passed down. And and you start hearing those stories going, and you start thinking like, yeah, let's get after it. And not that I always have, not that I, you know, like I have met, there's been people I'm like, oh, dang it, I should have talked to them.
Yeah, no,
you know,
that's it.
It was like there. And so, but it's just a reminder every time, because I never know where someone's going to be. And then I love telling those stories, you know. I mean, my dad and I just got off the phone with him a while ago. And you know what we talked about the entire time?
What's that?
Stories about people getting baptized. He was telling me about somebody he was just talking to at church Sunday, and this group of people, and they came down. So still, out of more than hunting, more than anything that we talk about, it's always about sharing the gospel and where that's at. And so we can get some encouragement from each other, and we just need more and more good stories. Yeah,
well, that's how I want to live my life. And hopefully a reminder to anybody listening to this that God is uniquely writing the story of your life, and he's uniquely putting people in your path on a daily basis, on a moment-by-moment basis, that nothing is an accident, nothing's a coincidence. And if you trust in him, just like Paul prayed that the message of the gospel would be clearly communicated through him, if you pray that simple prayer, don't worry about your qualification. Don't worry about your education. Don't worry about any of that stuff. Get in the Word. Spend time with Jesus every day. Then say, Lord, here I am. Send me. And he's going to put people in your path that only your story could speak to in a unique way and help them come to know Jesus. So, Willie, man, I love getting to know you. I have so much respect for you. I love your family. I love how Sadie has been such a bright light in my daughter's lives. I mean, your gospel genealogy has helped enrich the West family's gospel genealogy, and the ripple effect is felt and real. And I can't wait for everybody to check out the brand new book, Gospeller. And I'm going to be out in my backyard calling ducks till we meet again.
That'll be awesome. I can't wait. I think I saw my schedule. I think we will be at an event together soon. So I want to hear an updated version.
Oh, I got you.
Of that duck call, because I'll be on the stage at this thing with a microphone. So you better perform well, because you know me, when I get on the stage with a microphone, I may let you have it.
All right, I look forward to it. Thank you, my brother.
All right, buddy. See you, Matthew.
Dude, that was fun. Thanks, Willie. All right, thanks for joining me. Thanks to my guest, Willie Robertson. Man, he's amazing. Be sure to go pick up a copy of his latest book, Gospeller, and you're going to get stirred. You're going to get inspired. And it's just a reminder, man, let's make heaven crowded. Let's make sure that we realize that every day God's given us opportunities to tell a lost and hurting world about where hope can be found in Jesus. Hey, with that, I thank you so much for listening. Thanks for hopefully subscribing to the podcast. We've switched to a bi-weekly format for the summer, just kind of give you all a chance to go back. I don't want you to miss these episodes. So instead of listening to a new episode every week, instead it's going to be an episode every other week, and then you can go back and catch up on some of the great episodes that we're having. All right? I hope you enjoy it. God bless you. And remember, it's your story for his glory. I'll see you soon.